Thanks very much for doing this little interview with me.
Sure.
I'm really enjoying your Bison Tower speakers at the moment that you sent me. Your distributor in the EU has sent me, and they are really, really nice for the money. I was actually thinking of buying them myself because they're so good, and that's not just
Yeah,
some sort of reviewer saying that these are
that's not the base.
the next best thing. But I've got seven questions, if it's okay, Vince, just to go
Sure.
through and ask you. And then at the end, if you want to tell me anything else that I've missed or you think is
Okay.
important, that'd be really great. So, first question I want to ask you is I noticed you mentioned that you do make some of the drivers and crossovers yourself, or sorry, the drivers you sometimes have you make in house, other times you have
Yeah.
them made outside. Um, is How does that work, and can you sort of talk us
Well,
around that?
yeah, we can talk about it. Uh, we use over 40 companies who are sub-suppliers to us. I'll give you as an example. We have a great little model called the Arrow that whose woofer was made by VIFA at one point. And then VIFA went to China, and we didn't want to follow that. You know, the engineering there in that particular area of China wasn't as good. So we just took our tooling and we went to Scanspeak, and they assembled it for us, of course, to our very exacting type of scenario. Since we build our own drivers, a lot of companies say, well, oh yeah, we build our drivers, but they're actually just subcontracting them. I won't mention any names, but I would say that 99% of companies, that's what they do. We have the ability to build drivers, and we've had a great interplay and experience with the various loudspeaker companies. We've never been blackballed like some companies have, you know, by some of these subcontractors. We even used Dynaudio. We're the last people to actually use Dynaudio product in some of our speakers. And then once Dynaudio got sold a variety of times in the last few years, well, we weren't able to get those units anymore, or else we still would have continued with them. Uh, and we do a lot of, let's say, engineering interchange with these companies. I'll give you as an example, the Bison monitor, which is part of the Bison series that you saw, is assembled by Morel. And they
Right.
told us that it was their most difficult engineering challenge in 40 years, you know, to build the driver for us. Why? Because we know how a driver is built. We have exacting standards that maybe other companies don't have. And then we utilize a little bit of our ability to negotiate with them and tell them, well, look, even though the driver should cost, as an example, 200 US for a driver in the Bison monitor, we're not paying that. You can tell other companies that we offer that you build for us, and you'll make your money on other people's backs, but not on Totem's backs. So we're able to negotiate quite astutely a way of getting drivers built to standards that I think no one else gets built, and then extracting a very good pricing from them with the note that they can advertise that Totem utilizes their assembly techniques and their engineering expertise. But it is also always sort of a common thing, a work between our companies.
Right.
If a company cannot produce our drivers, we will build it ourselves, like we did in the Torrent units.
Right.
The Torrent, which are extremely expensive to build. Well, if we would take, I'll just walk over here and give you an example of one of the Torrent units. Well, if we take, this is a new 6-inch driver that I don't know if you see it here, but let me face it.
Okay. Yeah.
This is
Got it.
yeah, it's a 6-inch driver, and with all the machining and assembly costs, if somebody were to subcontract it for us, well, it would put it in the realm of around 1,300 US to build one of those drivers, and that would put it out of the price category that we try to be in. Yes,
Right.
with our help, they can maybe build the Torrent drivers, but there's magnetic technology and certain things that we don't share with other companies also. So in these non-standard drivers, we build them ourselves because there's proprietary stuff in there that we don't like to share. But for a driver such as the Bison, in this particular case, Well, we had a great example of the Bison frame in our Hawk driver, which was a ScanSpeak unit. And the ScanSpeak had some very good merits. You're maybe familiar with the Hawk unit from before, and it was a superbly musical speaker.
You could notice the ScanSpeak because of the
That's right.
the lines over the driver to break up the sound waves on the front face.
Correct. And we thought, well, maybe we can make one that is more durable than the ScanSpeak unit. So we used the ScanSpeak frame, and one of the ex-ScanSpeak engineers set up a manufacturing concern, and he assembles the driver for us. And that driver that is used in the Bison is quite indestructible. You'd really have to abuse it. Unlike the Hawk driver, which as soon as you, let's say, overdid it, the voice coil would slam at the bottom, and that would be the end of the driver.
Right.
It would cut pretty easily. So our VP, Lucy Lentini, said, well, if you're going to build a very, let's say, a modest-looking chassis such as the Bison Tower and have a one woofer unit, well, make it so it's extremely durable for both stereo listening and surround listening, because we deal with 40 countries and some people are very much into the surround aspect. Right. So we worked our butts off to get that driver sounding wonderful, have a very low FS, and of course, the cone is the same size as the spider being one of the suspension pieces behind it. So we're able to get some incredibly great bass out of it. Look, if we were able to get...
So the spider is that big ring, isn't it, that is behind the main unit. So that is essentially... So what you're seeing with the cone, the diameter of the spider is the same diameter as the cone.
Yes.
Okay.
And that gives us the ability to have this very huge throw with the proper magnetics, of course. And we also wanted the driver in this particular unit to be a first order crossover. That means that minimal amount of parts. Basically, all we would need is a proper coil. But in terms of coils, we just don't choose one coil. We go through, look at the series of coils that we have here. We have, I'll show you, maybe hundreds of coils, and we go through different gauges, Litz ones, until we find the right energy level for the driver. That's one of the most critical aspects of building, let's say, a first-order crossover. People think, a first-order crossover, that's easy. No, it's actually harder than a second or third-order crossover, in my opinion, because you're minimizing the amount of parts, and then you have to adjust the phase interaction between the drivers just with these minimal parts. But if you do so, the first order crossover gives you the ability of joining both the woofer and the tweeter into more than it would normally be. It's not just the addition of two drivers giving you, it's not 1 + 1 = 1 prime. It's 1 + 1 = 4 in this case, where you're taking the energy from the tweeter and the woofer and juxtaposing it one on top of the other through 3-4 octaves to give you this wonderful mid-range and spatial interaction between the units.
Yeah. I have said that what I've written down in my notes, that the sense of like really good atmospherics in the sound, probably one of the best I've actually come across. And you mentioned in your marketing that the spatial cues in the music is something that you can notice, and that's something that I thought as well, that when you when there's certain sounds in the music that make you feel like they're coming from behind you, they're really coming from behind you. So they feel as if they're, and also that there's the sense of like a luxurious tone and quality in the music, and the way that the mids are integrated well into the bass. So I thought that probably sort of way above like what you'd expect for the price point, I thought, from what I've tried, and a sound that's bigger than the speakers as well. Like, it's just, I think one person wrote on my YouTube channel, they said, I thought they were when they heard them at a hi-fi show, that they thought they were the bigger ones that you were demonstrating, because you had two by the side of each other.
Yeah, well, they're surprising. I like to surprise it. We don't do it as a gimmick to surprise. It's just that our mathematics are different. We don't use those small parameters in our calculations. So we think we're able to extract more bass from a small chassis and have advantages to using a smaller chassis speaker that has less, and being able to put it in a room wherever you want, as long as there's a competent and very close relationship between the tweeter and the woofer. They have to be synergistically able to join together. Yeah. And hence why we have different tweeters for different series, you know? And even in sometimes in a series, we'll have two sets of tweeters, because synergistically that is a better relationship.
Yeah. I was trying to work out what the type of material was for the cone, because it looks like a kind of paper come glass fiber. Is it a combination of both of those?
Absolutely correct. Right. It's a paper plus glass fiber. Some people say, well, why don't you use an exotic material like even we've tested graphene, we've tested, many of these exotic elements, but these exotic elements generally are brittle, and you're trying to establish good mid-range tone with brittle elements. You have to chop a lot of the upper frequencies from that woofer, and in so upper frequencies from that woofer, you're actually removing an enormous amount of energy and perturbing the ultimate phase relationship with the tweeter, because there's so much upper frequency energy. You have to use a steep crossover. You're just messing around with the wrong things.
Right. And is that why a lot of designers come back to dope paper? Because it's because it just meets that requirement. And then that's why it's such a common use of material. Obviously, the glass fiber stiffens it as well for a driver.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And the magnetics are strong enough that driver can handle about everything. And it's a wonderful driver unit. And don't forget, we're sort of selling it at a very competent price. This is a North American made product. A lot of people at this price point will assemble it in China. Yeah. We're against that. We have the Kin line, which we assemble in China, but it's under our own supervision. That means we have a full-time Canadian engineer that is there.
Yeah, I thought that because the price, it normally works. It works both ways. Like our products going to America are more expensive, and then the other way around because of obviously the shipping costs. But it seems in your case that the prices in Europe are pretty competitive, and especially in the UK.
Yeah. So. Yes, they are, and we have a great relationship with our distributors. Yes, we can have. There's always people asking for distributions here and there, and we stick with some of them because. Well, look, we like the longevity of having distributors who have worked with us for 20, 30 years. And in this case, Unit has been with us for 30 years. And both Bram and Sam are wonderful people who will support their stores and support the consumer base who buys our product.
Yeah.
We don't after the dollar. You can tell that from our speakers, actually. And you did the unboxing on the little speakers. And yes, they're a simple line because I believe in Bauhaus lines. That means that the Bauhaus Design School is one that is based on very simple lines that don't run out of style.
Yeah.
It's like early 80s, and you see one of the Japanese cars with all those curvy model shapes. And after a while, you say, wow, that's innovative. And then after a short time, you say, well, that's ugly.
Yeah.
So we want
keep it classic is a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a classic look. Yes, we're chastised by some people for keeping to a certain classic look, but in the end, it bears the time, let's say, effortless time stretching, because we keep our models for 20, 30 years. We're not a company that, we build a model and we'll change it in 3-4 years. No. If it's not for a very, very great reason, we will not change it.
Oh, congratulations, I should say this, on the fact that your box, you open it up longitudinally rather than vertically. Because I hate putting speakers back into boxes where you've got to lower them and do all that stuff where you're lining it on the floor and all that palaver. Other speaker manufacturers take note on that because it's just easier. But can I ask you about because the speaker terminals aren't at floor level to keep the speaker wires flush with the floor. Is that by virtue of the fact that the cabinets are braced internally and the crossover box and speaker terminal box has to be in the middle? Is there some reason around that's the case?
There is. It's a very fine porting that we do on the speaker. And if we would have changed the actual level of the terminal box in the back, it would interfere with the actual velocity of the airflow. And taking into account the wiring and the parts and the quality of the wiring that we utilize even internally, we decided to keep it at mid-level because that was the best sonic result.
Right.
I know it might seem to people, oh, why don't you put it on the floor? Well, there's many reasons why we don't put it towards the bottom of the chassis, is that we have to stretch out the amount of wiring internally, which changes a lot of the crossover symmetry, let's say, in that particular unit. So we do it mid-level, and it also keeps a wonderful flow of velocity. The velocity is very critical in totem products. Oftentimes people will try, we've had people who try to even copy the speaker because they say, oh, I can get those about the same componentry and I'll try to do it. And they always sort of fall apart because the velocity has to be tuned to the tenth of an inch per second type of thing.
Yeah.
And that hence why we put it there. I know it's not the most effective way, but it's still bi-wireable. And we did it purposely so people who have a dark room, a very dull room, can connect it, or an intermediate dull room will connect it to the upper terminals. And people who have sort of a very active and lively room, they'll connect it to the lower terminals, even without using by-wire capability. We think that a good cable on it will sound...
That's normally to do with the fact it's a direct path towards through the crossover,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
That's right. They're both separate. They're both wonderfully made, and they'll withstand the test of time. There's nothing in that speaker that will not sound as good in 30 years' time. Yeah. We're proud to say.
Because you were saying about the fact that also that the reason why you have your mitre construction with the way that the panels are joined together aids that longevity because you've got more glue surface area.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And is that for more for that, or is it more for affecting cabinet resonances, or is it a matter of both there?
It's a matter of both. When we do the lock mitering, we find that the resonance control, the way that we tune our boxes are still active, believe it or not. You know, there's some people that kick tires on cars, and then there's the audiophile who come up to a box and wants it to be completely inert. That removes an enormous amount of energy. It's like taking a wonderful guitar, which has harmonic expressiveness in phase to the rest of the music, and saying, I'm going to cover it with cement because I don't like that resonance.
Right.
Yeah, totem cabinets resonate in only particular areas, and that resonance is there for a reason. We ear tune our products, and sometimes we change them by 0.5 millimeter, either in depth or in height or in width, to control the resonances and make sure they contribute to the whole wonderful imaging that the speaker gives.
Yeah. No, I did notice that, because when I put my hand on the top, I can feel a bit more with yours compared to my own PMC speakers. But,
yes, definitely.
But what I liked about these as well is the fact that on a lot of speakers you have very fine edges where you've got the veneers up against the MDF or whatever fiberboard is underneath. And over time, when you're moving them about, those very, very thin lines break up.
Yes, they do.
Your ones you seem to use, and I've noticed this on your other models as well, you have a sort of edge strip. Is that right? Is that accurate? And then you that's painted, and then you've got is that for breaking up edge diffractions, or is that more for improving the quality of the product, or is it both?
I think it's not for the edge diffraction. It does help the edge diffraction, I must say. Yes, that's why we do the little chamfers, and woodworkers hate that, because when you finish a little corner and there's a 45-degree edge on it, they hate sanding that part and redoing it, and
right.
But it is necessary because of the flow, again, of the sound, but also for the durability of the cabinet.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the bifold effect. And even though it's a very simple design, it's a very smart design, which we've manicured over our 36 years of existence.
Because it
You know,
is a
we,
fine difference that you notice, like the quality of the cabinets and your speakers. And I've noticed this with the Hawks, and
mhm.
which were the ones that I was looking at some time ago because my dealer had them. But also like your Forest speakers, you can notice like when you're talking about build quality with speakers, like as a reviewer, you notice sort of good build quality, but then you notice better build quality. But it's a very fine difference between the two, if that makes sense. And I've noticed that with your speakers, it is a good quality of finish where the edges meet the cabinets, and that's the difference really.
That's the difference. And we employ very good artisans who work in Montreal. They're not cheap, but we still bring out a fairly inexpensive product for what it does. We're proud of that. I was a consumer. I was a person who wanted a lovely product, like a Quad 57 type sound, but that anyone could enjoy in a room. That was my ultimate goal, create a product that is lively, but that anybody in a room, wherever they're sitting, can enjoy and say, wow, that's real music. I'm intrigued by that. Yeah. I hear the harmonic, they're amazing. Some people don't know what harmonics are, but they say, oh, that detail in space just intrigues me. And that's what Totem speakers do, And a lot of people say, well, that's, we get some ridiculous commentary like, oh, that's not a sophisticated sound. Yes, it's sophisticated. Just get some good electronics and you'll see how sophisticated it is. I think every model that we make, and even in the past, if we made the Dreamcatcher or if we made a small box speaker, that small box speaker, I still live with at home because it's so marvelous. It doesn't lose its appeal because the more you give it, the more it gives you back.
Yeah. I get it. I'm with you. And the other thing that I wrote down is about you mentioned about that you apply a borosilicate coating on the inside. Could you sort of like explain what that is, how you apply it, and what that does?
I'll tell you. The reason why we do it is because in our initial experimentation in the late 80s, we found that speakers change cues. What does a cue mean? It just means the balance that the speaker has. So, and people, what do they do in the industry? Well, they put lead on the outside, they put cement, and all that contributes to cabinet deadening. Internally, they'll fill it up with polyfill. They use various types of foam. But I find that moronic. It's like throwing sand into an automobile engine because it's an electrostatic environment. And you have drivers that are sort of electrically charged, and they'll attract any small particles that are inside the box, and it just deadens and worsens the performance of the drivers over time. And we wanted something that dissipates energy, but not by foam filling or stuffing thing. We don't work for a fabric shop. We wanted something cutting. And one of my cousins had a doctorate from MIT in the 80s, and he said, the best energy dissipator I know is from this company in Florida that sells to NASA. They build their space shuttle tiles with this. So the space shuttle tiles were built with this powder. And what it does, it takes energy at a micro level, let's say at the atomic level, and dissipates it. So if you apply 1,500 degrees, heat to it, it'll take that energy and just dissipate it. And that's what we paint the internals of our cabinet with it. It's just as pricey as the drivers. Other companies will not do it. Why would you spend as much as a woofer and a tweeter just to paint the insides of your cabinet? And it looks innocuous. It's a white powder that we put in a latex base and we paint it, but it keeps the cue of the speaker stable. Even if you use it for 10 hours, it doesn't change. So the stability image remains. And that was something that is close to my heart. And I wanted to keep
is it like is it just like a very thin layer, is it? Or how thick does it go on the inside?
I would say that it is around 0.5 millimeter to 3/4 of a millimeter thick. If we put too much of it, it's not that good. So we apply the correct amount for each speaker.
Right.
Each speaker, various amount,
Yeah. And the other thing I want to talk to you about is the feet, because I've been reading up on the materials that you use. You use the trade name Delrin is the composite, I believe, like a plastic to stop standing waves in the feet. Some people are going to be thinking and this is the reason why I wanted to ask you this. Oh, okay, you've got a lot of contact area with the floor, and the normal conventional wisdom is you'd use the spikes in the spike holes on the underside of those feet. Your manual says, or your brochure says, don't do that because they're not needed.
Right.
Can you talk me through what is this material? Why not use the spikes, and why just rely on that big surface area to the floor?
Okay. If you use the large surface area, you contact it directly to the floor, you get a sort of muddy sound. And the muddiness is not due to the contact of the floor. The muddiness is due to the repetitive standing waves that are formed on the surface of the cabinet.
Yeah.
Because the surface of the cabinet will make standing waves. And if you have those repetitive standing waves, after listening to music for an hour or two, you find it disturbing. Your brain, ultimately, you don't know what it is, but you lose interest in listening to music. So the claw has that geometric shape, which is like a sharp egg shape in the front. And what it does is that pressing it against the front of the cabinet and the sides of the cabinet, it breaks up any even standing waves. So you never get repetition of them. And that makes for a quiet cabinet, what we term a quiet acoustic cabinet for our needs. And then why do we choose Delrin? Well, a lot of people, it's not a molded plastic. This Delrin is actually about the same density, not quite the same density as aluminum, but almost the same density as aluminum. And for this particular cabinet, it's quieter than the aluminum cones we use in the forest, because we can machine in aluminum or we can machine in Delrin.
Yeah, right, because I was actually, sorry to interrupt, when I was pressing them, I think it feels like aluminium. When you actually hit it feels really,
and these
metal-like.
So they cost us approximately within 50 cents of an aluminum one. But we'll use Delrin because in this particular case, because the thickness of the wood, the variable density MDF that we utilize in our walls is actually a little thinner than on a forest. These are better at this acoustical non-repetitiveness. It just works better.
Yeah.
We didn't want to add on something to our SKU count or to our inventory, but we did it because it improved the sound quality of this particular speaker. Competing in marketing against some extremely large companies, we have to be different and show innovation. A lot of people don't realize that Totem is a leading manufacturer with incredible innovation. Let me give you a little bit of our history. 1987, we come out with the Model 1. It was revolutionary. Every show we went to, we had oodles of people just wanting to listen to it. Why? Because of the spatial attributes, yes, the tone, the timbre, all that beautifully done in space. But then we stretched the limits. We made the Manitou, which a lot of people thought was an isobaric design. It wasn't. Yes, it utilized two woofers back to back, but they were out of phase, and we purposely did them out of phase so they would move as a piston. And it was a vented box. And we were actually able, even with the B&K equipment that we had at the time, it was flat down to 29 hertz. We would say, plus or minus 3 dB at 30 hertz. And Opus 3 Records still utilizes that as their ultimate recording monitor. And many other studios do so also. Quietly, great companies that continue loving that product. So that was a little revolutionary for the time. We built a Taboo, which was built with no capacitors. It was just resistors and inductors. And that has not been replicated by anyone. We built a 5-way speaker in the Shaman, which saved somebody a lot of money, one of the major other companies, because they were being taken to court, and people were saying, you're being taken to court because we were first with that tweeter on top of the box. But we proved that we were before that company who claims they were first with Shaman.
So this is a sort of progression of this speaker is a progression of that line of speakers like the Hawks with an improved tweeter. I noticed you mentioned in your press release. How's the progression of these speakers going compared to the ones you've done in the past? What's the main idea behind these?
Okay. Our speakers always stood apart, I think, sonically. But these are amazing because I developed a small, because the tweeter goes up to 30,000 cycles, ruler straight, I might add, on these particular units, they have amazing off-axis dispersion. So that off-axis dispersion, even if you're sitting 40, 50, 60 degrees off-axis, you can hear it. You know,
yeah,
you
right.
can hear
Now,
20,000.
I'm going to say, I'm going to jump in here because I'm going to say I can agree with you, because I've got, on the end of my room, I've got British living rooms as such now that they've become so small that we have, like, well, in flats, sometimes you have like a kitchen on the end of the living room. That's why I've got my kitchen to the side here. And so I'm often doing the washing up in a very glamorous way, as you do. And the speakers are playing and I can hear the sound coming pretty decent off.
Pretty decent.
At least 60 degrees, 70 degree angle to where the sink is, to my normal listening position that I'm sitting in now. So yeah, I mean, I'd definitely agree with you on that. The dispersion is very, very good.
It's amazing, and that's what the dispersion aspect. We learned a lot from building the Tribe Tower, which was a dispersion king, which is the dispersion king. That is an amazing speaker, but we wanted to incorporate it in a lower cost unit such as the Bison, with a little bit warmer bass and a little bit greater ease of use. You can put the Bison on anything. You can put it on a small kin amp. We make a little digital amp, and it sounds good.
Yeah.
You can put it on intermediate units that you've tried, the Regas, the names, all that. We have them all here, and we make sure those units play beautifully with the Bison.
It's a very fluid, with name, it's a very fluid amplifier, because I've heard my dealer playing it with the Super 8.3, and that was very fluid sounding. I've got a Hagel H390, and it's beautiful with that. And I've also got a Gato Audio Amp 150 at the moment, which is their very nice designed amp. I haven't tried that yet with them, but the Hagel is a match made in heaven kind of thing.
Yes, I think so. So they're gonna give you a lot for that intermediate electronic thing. And if you want to throw some exotic tube or some exotic solid state at them, they'll do even better.
Yeah,
you know, and they will not disappoint. That's the beautiful thing about it. And what did I do to the Bison line that renders it even better than what I think we had done in the past is that we developed a little tweeter circuit, which I can't get into because it is sort of a proprietary little thing, which we apply to each speaker, slightly different, but it's able to center focus the voice and put to that amazing off-axis dispersion. We have a center point that we never lose. That's the beautiful thing about it. So that centering of the image is astonishing. So people who have used it in the US and other areas where, you know, maybe surround is more acceptable, they've said, oh my gosh, I can get amazing center fill from it. I hardly need a center channel. But we tell them, no, you can use a center. We have an appropriate Bison center for it. But that ability.
Yeah, no, I found them very good as well against. I agree with that, and I've also found them really good against not too quite close to the walls. They're still pretty good.
Yes,
so that's another thing for in there.
Yeah,
that's a plus for them.
That's
as well.
a suit of you. That's a suit of you. You know, look, the hardest critic for me is our own VP, Lucy Lentini, and she says, look, some people don't want their speakers 5 foot out from the wall. They want them to sound great a foot away from the back wall, 1.5 feet. So the Bison is made to be very flexible in that domain. And this particular circuit helps in this domain enormously. I can't get into details, but it's tuned specifically for each model. So we have a slightly different circuit for each model because this has been to rationalize the phase distribution throughout the room for these speakers.
But thanks very much for speaking to me, Vince, and answering these questions. And I'm glad that you've done so. And as I say, I really, really like the product. And
thank you very much.
Can't wait to get the review out.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. And thank you for your good ear in all respects.
Brilliant.